You ever imagined being trapped no way out? Your heart pounding so loud it echoes through the forest? Now picture this. What if, in the middle of despair, a wild animal changed your fate? This is the story of Julia Spencer, a woman who left everything behind for a bigger purpose, only to face death in the African jungle. But what happened there under the scorching Kenyan sun will leave you speechless. Can you believe a lion, with eyes that seem to carry centuries of wisdom, could teach what true redemption is? Julia wasn't one to take risks. A zoo worker, in San Francisco, she lived a steady routine, but something inside her screamed for more. So in a moment that felt like a call from the universe, she ditched it all. She swapped the pavement for the red dust of Africa, joining a conservation group in Kenya. Little did she know that choice would lead to a moment blending terror, hope, and a miracle of nature. Want to know the wildest part? A lion she'd saved years before seemed to remember her. Yeah, remember, like the universe was cooking up something bigger. This story isn't just about survival. It's about the courage to change, empathy that crosses species, and the strength of bonds time can't erase. So grab a coffee, breathe in the scent of adventure, and come with me. Let's dive into the day Julia, tied up and alone, learned. The jungle holds lessons no book can teach. But how did she end up there? And what did that lion do to change everything? Keep listening, because what's next will give you chills. The sun scorched Julia Spencer's skin like it wanted to melt. Her, tied to a tree, ropes cutting into her wrists. She heard the relentless buzz of flies and the heavy silence of the savannah. She was alone, or nearly. A few meters away, shadows moved through the tall grass. Lions. Not one, but a whole pride. Led by a male with a deep scar on his forehead, like a tattoo of the wild. Julia closed her eyes, heart racing. Is this how it ends, she thought. But get this, fate had other plans. How could something so terrifying turn into a miracle? Days earlier, Julia could never have pictured herself there, at the mercy of nature. She'd arrived in Kenya full of dreams, the smell of wet earth in her nose, and hoped to make a difference. But the jungle doesn't forgive mistakes. On a solo patrol, she crossed paths with poachers. They overpowered her, left her there, a living warning to other conservationists. As the heat pressed in, Julia felt loneliness heavier than the ropes. Who hasn't had a moment where the world seems to abandon you? Stop and picture it. The emptiness, the fear, and then a low roar, almost a whisper. What was coming? The scarred lion approached, his amber eyes locked on her. Julia held her breath, but instead of attacking, he sniffed the air, like he recognized something. And then, in a move that seemed to defy logic, he bit the ropes, tearing them with precision. Free? Julia fell to her knees, the hot ground under her palms. Can you believe it? A lion, a predator, saving a human. It was like the universe winked at her. But who was that lion, and why did he do it? The answer lay in a meeting years ago, a thread of memory the jungle never forgot. Julia Spencer woke every day to the rumble of cars in San Francisco, the air thick with exhaust and coffee. Her life was stable, but you know how it is. Sometimes your heart craves more than a safe routine. A zoo worker, she spent hours watching lions behind bars, their golden eyes telling stories she could only guess at. Something in her whispered, "You were born for more than this." So, in a surge that felt like destiny's call, she left it all. She traded concrete for Kenya's red dust, joining a conservation group. Courage? She had plenty. But was she ready for what lay ahead? Arriving in the savannah was like stepping into another world. The hot wind carried the scent of dry grass, and the horizon seemed to swallow the sky. Julia, with her worn backpack, felt her chest swell with purpose. The group welcomed her like family, teaching her to track footprints and respect nature in its rawest form. Here, you don't watch wildlife, you live with it, a local guide said with a sly grin. Julia jotted it all down in a notebook, like she could capture the soul of the jungle. Who hasn't wanted to ditch everything and find a place that makes you feel alive? If you love stories like this, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any. But The Jungle, man, it tests even the biggest dreamers. Those first days were all about learning. Julia found out conservation wasn't just love for animals. It was a rock-solid commitment. Night patrols, confusing maps, and the constant fear of poachers. One night, as the group camped, she heard a roar so deep it shook the ground. Just a lion, a teammate chuckled. But to Julia, it was a reminder. Out here, she was small. Still, something grew in her, a bond with the team and a passion to protect what was wild. But the jungle doesn't give you a break. One wrong step, and everything could change. The jungle doesn't teach theory, it throws you into the fire. Julia learned that fast, sweat dripping down her forehead, the crack of twigs under her boots. In her first days in Kenya, every step was a test. One morning, tracking antelope prints with the group, she nearly stepped on a venomous snake, camouflaged in the dry dirt. Its hiss sliced the air like a knife. Pure instinct made Julia leap back, heart in her throat. "Watch it." "Rookie!" a guide shouted, half laughing, half serious. Can you imagine the scare? Nature out there didn't forgive distractions, and Julia was starting to grasp the real risk. But snakes were the least of it. On a patrol, the group found signs of illegal hunting, wire traps and fresh boot prints. The air grew heavy, a metallic stench of dried blood lingering. Julia's chest tightened. This wasn't just a job, it was a war against those who saw the jungle as profit. The group decided to mark the spot and call for backup, but Julia, eager to prove herself, made a mistake. She thought she could scout a nearby trail alone. Just 5 minutes, she figured. Who hasn't thought they could handle something bigger than themselves? Close your eyes and feel the weight of that choice. Because it changed everything. Half. An hour later, Julia was lost. The radio crackled, useless, and the sun began to dip, painting the sky orange. Then she saw it. A fresh zebra carcass, cuts too precise for predators. Poachers. Before she could run, she heard voices and footsteps. She tried to hide, but it was too late. Rough hands grabbed her, and panic took over. Tied up and left behind, Julia faced the truth. The jungle wasn't just beauty, it was raw danger. But something bigger was coming. Something even the poachers didn't expect. Night fell fast in the savannah, and the cold cut like a blade. Julia, tied to a tree, felt the ropes dig into her wrists, the rough scrape against her skin. Alone, with the wind whispering through the bushes, she faced the jungle's emptiness. The worst wasn't the fear, but the loneliness, that weight that makes you doubt everything. Far from the group, no radio. She had only her thoughts and the distant cackle of hyenas. Who hasn't felt the whole world leave them behind? But, get this, nature was about to show that not everything is abandonment. Before being caught, Julia was on her first solo patrol, full of courage but unprepared. In the dawn's faint light, she spotted a wounded rhino, its horn nearly torn off by a poacher's trap. The beast snorted, eyes full of pain and rage. Julia wanted to help, but the risk was huge. She tried calling for backup, but the radio just hissed, useless. That's when the poachers showed up, swift and brutal. They overpowered her, left her there as a warning. As the sun rose, the smell of hot dust filled the air, and Julia felt hope slipping away. Stop for a second and feel it. The desperation of being so close to saving a life but so far from saving yourself. Then, something shifted. A low roar echoed, not threatening but almost curious. Julia opened her eyes and saw shadows moving in. The dusk, a pride of lionesses followed by a male lion with a scarred forehead. Her heart raced. Predators so close. But there was something in the lion's eyes, a calm that seemed to say, I know you. It was like empathy, that force that connects hearts, crossed the barrier between human and animal. The jungle, so cruel moments before, now seemed to whisper a promise. The lion's roar echoed, deep, like the jungle itself was speaking. Julia, still tied, felt the ground hum under her feet, her heart pounding loud enough to challenge the fear. The scarred lion approached, lionesses trailing him like living shadows. But instead of attacking, he stopped. His amber eyes met hers, and for a moment, time froze. Ever felt a gaze that seems to read your soul? It was like that lion carried an old memory, an invisible thread tying them. And then, in a move that defied logic, he bit the ropes, freeing her. 2 years earlier, Julia was still at the San Francisco Zoo. A young lion, wounded by poachers, arrived in critical condition. The scar on his forehead, fresh then, marked his fight for life. Julia spent nights by his side, the smell of antiseptic mixing with damp hay in the enclosure. She talked to him, like he could understand, and slowly he recovered. When he was sent to a Kenyan sanctuary, Julia felt an ache, but also peace. Go live free, she thought. Who'd guess that one moment's empathy could come back like this? Like a gift. From the universe? Now, free from the ropes, Julia dropped to her knees, the warm soil under her trembling hands. The lion stepped back, the lionesses following, as if they knew their job was done. It was more than survival. It was redemption. A bond time couldn't erase. Julia took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs. But the night still held dangers, and the wounded rhino she'd tried to save needed help. How would she manage, so fragile and far from the group? Julia was still shaking, the heat of the soil under her hands mingling with the relief of being free. The scarred lion had vanished into the dark, but his gaze stayed burned into her, like a flame that doesn't fade. How could a wild animal remember her? The answer wasn't just in the jungle, but in science. Studies from the University of Oxford show that lions and other animals, like elephants, hold emotional memories for years, especially tied to those who helped them. Ever stop to think how much an animal can feel? It was like nature had a way of saying thank you, even without words. As she stood, Julia felt the night's cool breeze brush her face, scented with the sweet aroma of acacias. She wasn't the same anymore. That lion, with his scar and his choice, showed empathy isn't just human, it's a force pulsing in the jungle. Research backs it. Animals form bonds with those who protect them, sometimes even risking their own lives. The lion didn't act by chance. He recognized Julia, like she'd recognized him years before. Know that moment when you feel the universe lining everything up? That's exactly what it was. But the night still demanded action, and Julia knew the wounded rhino depended on her. Science could explain the bond, but nothing prepared Julia for what she felt. Every heartbeat seemed to echo the lesson. An animal's memory mirrors our own humanity. She grabbed the radio, now with a weak signal, and called the group. "I'm alive," she said, voice hoarse. But the jungle wasn't done teaching. The two poachers were still out there, and the rhino needed urgent help. How could she turn this miracle into a bigger victory? The radio crackled, and Julia's voice shook but burned with resolve. "Poachers, wounded rhino, find me," she said, the jungle's echo swallowing her words. Free from the ropes, she felt the weight of gratitude for the lion who saved her, but also the urgency to act. The conservation team arrived fast, the jeep's headlights slicing the darkness like blades. The engine's rumble mixed with the chirp of crickets, and Julia pointed the way, guided by an instinct the jungle had awakened. Can you feel her pulse racing? Justice was within reach, and she wasn't giving up now. The poachers didn't expect resistance. Caught off guard by the group, they tried to flee, but the local guides knew every trail. In minutes, authorities, alerted by radio, surrounded the criminals' camp. The handcuffs clicked, a sharp sound that brought Julia relief. But the real miracle was the rhino. Sanctuary vets arrived, the air thick with the sharp smell of medicine. The exhausted animal got care and days later returned to the savannah, its horn still scarred but alive. Who doesn't get moved by a second chance like that? Conservation, Julia learned, was about saving one life at a time, watching the rhino walk away. Julia's heart swelled. The jungle, which nearly broke her, now taught her about justice, not man's, but the kind that balances nature. She gazed at the horizon, the sky pink with dawn, and vowed to keep going. But something still called her, the story of that lion and what it meant for the world. Julia sat under an acacia, her notebook open in her lap as the wind carried the warm scent of dry earth. The savannah, now quiet, seemed to listen to her words. She wrote about the scarred lion who saved her and the rhino who got a new chance. Each letter was an echo of gratitude, not just to the animals but to the jungle that transformed her. Sometimes, the greatest teachers don't speak, she noted. Ever felt a moment change who you are? Her pen shook in her hand, but her heart was steady, full of a purpose San Francisco could never offer. That experience wasn't just survival. It was a lesson about nature and its invisible bonds. Julia realized kindness, even in a place so harsh, creates ripples that return. The lion with his memory and the rhino with its strength showed empathy as a universal language. The soft rustle of leaves seemed to agree, like the jungle approved. She closed the notebook, its worn leather under her fingers, and looked at the horizon. Julia's transformation wasn't just personal. It was a call to share this story with the world. Back at camp, Julia shared her notes with the group. The toughened guides fell silent, moved. "This needs to be heard," one said. Julia knew her mission was bigger now, to inspire others to protect the jungle, to hear its lessons. But how could she carry this message beyond the trees and roars? Something grand was coming, something she couldn't yet imagine. The savannah bid Julia farewell with a sunset that set the sky ablaze, the air rich with the sweet perfume of wildflowers. Back at camp, she held her notebook, now brimming with words that pulsed with life. The story of the scarred lion, the saved rhino, and Julia's own transformation wasn't just hers. It was a cry from nature, a reminder that kindness and empathy can change the world. "Sometimes the greatest teachers have 4 paws," she wrote, smiling. "Ever felt an animal teach you something no book could?" The jungle showed Julia that every act of courage, no matter how small, leaves an eternal mark. This journey, which began with fear and ropes, ended with gratitude and purpose. Julia returned to Kenya years later, now leading conservation projects, inspiring others to hear the jungle's voice. Her story spread worldwide, touching hearts through videos, books, and talks. The lesson is clear. Nature isn't just a place, it's a school of transformation. Stop and feel it for a moment. A lion remembering a human, a rhino coming back to life, a woman finding her path. Isn't that what makes us human? So if this story warmed your heart, the next video YouTube suggests will move you even more. Don't miss it. And you ever had an animal change your life? Share it in the comments. Your story could inspire others just like Julia's. And don't forget, the jungle's always teaching. You just have to listen.